I joke that the fastest growing immigrant group, everyone goes, oh, all the Polish are gone. I'm like, the fastest growing immigrant group is the hipster artists that can't afford to live in Quickenville anymore.
That's the voice of
August Gitschlag,
the city clerk of one of the most interesting cities in southeast Michigan, Hamtramck. It might surprise you that the 2.1 square miles of Hamtramck are the densest, as far as residents per square mile, of any in the state. With roots to before 1800, the city has seen a succession of immigrants. Founded by French-Canadian commander Jean-Francois Hamtramck, the township was settled by people from what we know today as the province of Quebec in Canada. Since then, it's become a village of German farmers. And then with Polish immigrants as the automobile industry rose in the first quarter of the 20th century. By 1922, Hamtramck had turned itself into a city to stop it from being annexed by the city of Detroit. Today, it has a very diverse population, including those Germans and Poles, African Americans, and immigrants from Bangladesh, Pakistan, Yemen, and many other places. It's also very walkable, unlike most of Metro Detroit. There are corner bars and grocery stores, churches and mosques, hardware stores, community festivals. Walking the streets of Hamtramck, I see the cityscape of Detroit that my grandparents grew up in, one that I've only known through photo albums. There are blocks and blocks of duplexes and single-family homes humming with activity, the delicious smells of a restaurant wafting through the air. To keep that energy alive, the enclave, surrounded by Detroit and Highland Park, has found strength in diversity. Their motto has been, literally, a League of Nations. And the city is growing, where most of Metro Detroit is either staying the same or shrinking. So what's behind all of this? Joining me is August Gitschlag and City Councilman
Ian Parada.
That's right after we thank our Daily Detroit members who make in-depth conversations like these possible. Your support matters, so join us at patreon.com/dailydetroit. And thank you. So I am sitting in Hamtramck City Hall. What about Hamtramck draws people? Because there's a lot of talk about like the comeback of Detroit, but when you look on the streets, there's development happening. There are new windows going in. There are places opening up. There's all kinds of creative projects. You think about the Ant Hall that's expanded and things like that. Hamtramck's been like running along and maybe not getting as much press as Detroit, but I think about when things are actually happening and people are moving in. When I talk to my friends, people I know, Hamtramck's where it's at.
Well, one of my favorite phrases to hear is people say, well, it's not like it used to be. But it's exactly like it used to be. Hamtramck has always been a thriving immigrant community and a thriving bar scene and young people scene. It's very diverse, very eclectic, and that is exactly what it is now. It's just a different look. And we are constantly bringing in new businesses, bringing in new restaurants, new housing. It's really an exciting time to be part of Hamtramck.
It's also home to things like Detroit City FC that starts to bring people into the area. What's drawn you to Hamtramck, and why are you part of this?
Well, I came here about 10 years ago. I was initially attracted by the low cost of housing and property, and also the international diversity of Hamtramck, and that's what has continued to keep me here. I started out doing rental property, and eventually my brother and I transitioned to opening a bar here in Hamtramck, Trixie's Bar. So I'm invested with my business. I own my house here, and I spend all my time and money here. So really everything about Hamtramck has brought me in and kept me here.
There's something beautiful about city leaders who are also bartenders, because you own a bar and you bartend on Fridays at Whiskey in a Jar.
For 13 years now, ever since I worked for a state senator before I came here.
How does that influence your work? Does that help you be more connected to folks and know what's going on the ground?
You'd think. The people that come in and out of the bar scene aren't necessarily the same people you deal with at City Hall. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I've had students come in and try to interview me from Wayne State that talk about city politics while I'm sitting behind the bar. I only worked there one day a week on Friday nights, because when you worked in politics, you never knew when your boss was going to lose an election or something was going to happen, and suddenly you had nothing to do. So I always held on to my side hustle. And now it's become we have a Progressive Fridays there. So we kind of try to actively bring in people who are active in the city to come on Friday nights and kind of mingle with each other. So it's not a unique perspective, but it's you get to know people pretty well.
Looking forward with the city, when you go down Joe's Campo, when you go down various streets in multiple corners of the city, you see development and things happening. Is there kind of like a framework or a vision for this going forward?
Well, Conan Avenue 20 years ago was empty. And it's the Bengali community that's come and thrived there and opened up the businesses. And same with the Yemeni community. Again, it's an immigrant community that comes in and takes over the housing, takes over the businesses just to serve their people, just like the Polish community did, just like the Albanian community did, just like the Ukrainian community did. It's the Balkan communities. That's what Hamtramck has always been. It's always been attractive to immigrant groups that come in and make a home here. And that's always going to transition every quarter century or so. So the vision is to keep that going. We are doing refugee housing here in town for Syrian refugees. And we just finished a market study, a housing market study that analyzed what the population of Hamtramck is and how better to develop around that population to serve them. We've just done a complete parks revitalization here in Hamtramck. All of our parks have been upgraded. We've received grants to do all the parks infrastructures with security cameras and new trees and new playscapes. And these parks are full of people all the time. We have a brand new park opening up on the other side of 75, the Sarah Garrett Park. These are things that the neighborhoods want. The children want to play, and there's lots of kids. Our schools are opening new schools. We're not closing schools like in Detroit. We just open a new school. So we are thriving when it comes to families and child development here. So it's something we have to keep in mind. When our suburbs are closing schools, we're opening them.
To kind of piggyback off of what August said, a good way to kind of describe where we are in Hamtramck right now, I think, is you can just look at this quick sentence. Hamtramck is where old churches are becoming new businesses and old businesses are becoming new mosques. You see that happening over and over in Hamtramck. It's just nice to see the way that nothing is going to waste. People are moving in and they're utilizing the resources that we have here, and it's working for the people that are moving in and for the people that have lived here. I think everybody is seeing the benefits of an influx into the community.
It strikes me in the national political environment we're in today that the power of immigrants, what does that bring to the table that gives you guys, it gives Hamtramck an advantage? Because if you look at the statistics, Metro Detroit's population is flat and has been flat since like 1970, within like 4%, whereas the rest of the country has grown like 60%. But here, people are choosing Hamtramck, whether it's immigrants, whether it's longtime Detroiters, whether it's people who are looking for an alternative that is not the high expense of downtown Detroit. What kind of strength does that give the community?
I think one of the biggest things about having immigrant population and people that are coming into the area is that when somebody new approaches something old, they look at it in a new light. And I think that's what we have had in Hamtramck, where so many of our newer residents, they come to Hamtramck and they see nothing but potential. Whereas maybe some people that have been around here, and I'm not trying to say that they're not doing anything, but when you look at the same thing over and over again, you just tend to see that same thing. But when somebody new comes in and looks at that thing, they don't see what you saw. They see what they think it could be or the potential of it. So I think that's been a really beneficial aspect to Hamtramck, that we have a lot of fresh eyes with fresh ideas, bringing a new life into it.
I think Wayne County just had a study recently about diversity that came out.
About the immigrant population is why Wayne County has grown in population. It's been basically the influx of immigrants into Metro Detroit from around the world, and that's kind of what's kept Wayne County afloat. Is almost what they said. I don't know if it's afloat's the right word, but it's kind of like I said. Conan Avenue was empty until the Bengali community came and filled up those storefronts, and that's now where Banglatown, Hamtramck, and Detroit share that Banglatown border over there, and that is a thriving community. I mean, the housing stock in that area and in Hamtramck proper there's not a lot of empty houses. I mean, if the house is empty, someone's banging on the door trying to buy it.
I tell this to a lot of people. If you want to see an interesting visual of what Hamtramck is and something that speaks to the strength of Hamtramck, go on Google Maps, type in Hamtramck, and see an overview of the satellite image of Hamtramck. Zoom out a little bit. You'll see nothing but green around Hamtramck. Hamtramck is all buildings. It's all still there. It's always been there, and it will be here for generations to come because of the strength of the community and the belief that like we are in it together, and whatever is good for one person is good for all of us. And if you let a house deteriorate next to you, it's going to spread to the rest of the block, and that hasn't happened in Hamtramck, and you can see that. There's nowhere that you can see it more clearly than like a Google Map visual.
Hamtramck doesn't have a demolition program like the city of Detroit does. That's not a problem that we have here. Our buildings are here and people want them.
Yeah, so the problem is we don't have enough room and enough space and enough empty buildings for people to move into or to build houses on or whatever.
Well, that makes me think, because when I've traveled around the country and I think about urban dense areas, I think about Hamtramck being a lot more like a Brooklyn or somewhere in Chicago than any other area in Metro Detroit because of that true density. So that leads me to the question. Do you think that if available land is taken up, do you think we're ever going to see people start to build up?
Absolutely. We are going to see repurposing is what we're going to see. We've already started to see churches turned into lofts. We've seen old apartment stores turned into lofts. Up and down Joseph Campo, some of the storefronts might be empty right now. We can argue about the developers and the people that own those storefronts, but the lofts above them are full. They're all full. We are going to start seeing building up. We're going to start seeing repurposing, and that's happening in Detroit as well. But I've always compared, you mentioned Brooklyn, I've always compared Hamtramck to Chicago's neighborhoods, like the parks, where it's all walkable. You have your neighborhood grocery stores, you have your entertainment district, you can buy clothes, you can buy food, you can buy anything you need within a 15-minute walk in Hamtramck. And you can't say that about any other part of Detroit, really. I mean, you can in maybe Corktown, Mexican Town, some of the neighborhoods, but Hamtramck has been like this since the 20s.
Well, that's one of the things that taken away. So in the last couple of months, I moved to the North End. So I can walk to Hamtramck and easily bike here. And I thought it's about the same distance from my house to here as it is to, say, Midtown and downtown Detroit. I thought I would go back to having my center of my world being Midtown. I used to live in Midtown, things like that. I find myself on a day-to-day basis much more so going towards Hamtramck because the stuff's actually here as opposed to there where it's like, it's great and it's fun and whatever, but like you can't eat a museum.
I love Midtown. I travel to Midtown. I eat over there too. We're very close. One of the best parts about living in Hamtramck is I'm easy access to my parents in the suburbs up the freeway and easy access to downtown Detroit. Any sporting event, museum, or concert I want to go to is a $7 Uber ride. You can't beat that. It's cheaper than parking downtown to live here and Uber downtown. So that's one of my favorite parts about living in Hamtramck proper.
I think I'd be remiss if I didn't, at least for a little bit, touch on what's happening in one little corner of Hamtramck and everything that's been going on with the GM Poletown plant. Like, is that something that you guys are worried about or thinking about?
It definitely is a very complicated issue, and I don't think I'm going to be able to provide like a succinct answer to what you're asking. But that being said, the plan to continue production at the plant after some retooling is definitely a benefit for Hamtramck. That plant provides, I think, about 5% of our revenue per year in payment of lieu of taxes payment. So to lose that would be absolutely devastating to Hamtramck. And during the retooling, it's going to cause some headaches. But in the long run, I think that we are poised to benefit from that. You know, as far as the workers and the amount of money that the people that live here and work there, or maybe work there and spend here, I don't know how much of a correlation there is currently. I know in the past there was a lot more people from the city of Hamtramck that used to live here, work in that plant, and at that time there would have been a lot more business like bouncing back and forth. But I think in the last 10 to 15 years, 20 years, we really have seen a decline in the population. Those people that live in Hamtramck that work at those plants, I think a lot of them actually probably moved out to the suburbs, are living there. Day to day, the plant being here, while it does have some impact on Hamtramck, it's not a make or break situation with the workers that are coming and going here. But as far as the taxes go, that is a very tenuous situation, and we want nothing but to see them in production and bringing jobs to the area and helping us with our tax revenue.
One of the stereotypes of the GM plant would be that the white-collar workers, they love coming into town and eating lunch and going to all our great restaurants, and the blue-collar workers just jump on I-94 and go to eat a burger at Gator Jake's in Sterling Heights. They just go home, and they don't, because they don't have the kind of lunch hours that the white-collar guys do. So there was a lot of fear in the restaurant industry in town about that, about losing some of that. But there's also a big gain on the other side of town where all these factories are opening up just across the border in Detroit, where there's all that vacant land from the American Axle. And so those white-collar workers are starting to come into town, and people are starting to live here. They want to move. Younger, more tech-savvy people do not want to live in suburbia. They want to live in an eclectic, they're right out of college. They want to live in eclectic neighborhoods that are walkable, like Hamtramck. And we are actively trying to attract those people.
And I think that's probably one of our biggest demographic shifts in the last 10 years. I know when I first moved to this area 10 years ago, I would go to like Whiskey in the Jar, hang out there. And it seemed like anytime someone like that was similar to me moved into the area, they would come to Whiskey in the Jar and like instantly everybody in town would know who that person is. They'd be like, oh, have you met the new guys that moved into town? And like we would know every single thing about them. Now you walk around Hamtramck and you're just like, who are all these people? And that's not a bad thing. It's a good thing because like I don't want to know everything about everybody in Hamtramck anyways.
Well, you're on city council, aren't you supposed to?
No, it's the other way around. They're supposed to know everything about what I'm doing.
So as we kind of like start to wrap up here, I think I'll look at two sides of the same coin. I think first, what is the biggest challenge that you see for the community going forward? And then what is the biggest opportunity and makes you most excited going forward with Hamtramck?
The biggest challenge is the same challenge that most inner ring suburbs have, and it is crumbling infrastructure. It's keeping our water mains and our roads and that infrastructure there. Also maintaining the businesses that we have, keeping them here because everyone wants to go to Midtown. They think that that's the big place hot place to go right now. So keeping them here is from a business standpoint. But at the same time, because Midtown is thriving, we're also thriving. People are coming up this way. And people are noticing that Hamtramck is here. It's walkable. And there's just more people. Like I joke that the fastest growing immigrant group, everyone goes, oh, all the Polish are gone. I'm like, the fastest growing immigrant group is the hipster artists that can't afford to live in Quickenville anymore. That's our fastest growing immigrant group, really. And they're living here and they're not voting here yet because they're keeping their car insurance in Livonia and Sterling Heights because it's $3,000 cheaper. So that's another big challenge is the redlining down here and making sure our residents actually register, vote, and function in our city government.
That actually leads me to a question because that's something that Detroit and other, frankly, inner ring suburbs wrestle too with is car insurance. Are there any innovative solutions that could help that? But on the other hand, too, one of the things that strikes me is that Hamtramck's actually quite walkable, so that outside of transportation to your job, you can exist here without a car, right? Outside of,
well, absolutely. Years ago, everyone walked to the GM plant, or they walked to the Dodge main plant, or they walked to American Axle. They didn't need a car. Now everyone's living on top of each other and parking is a premium. Yes, it's a thing. It's a challenge.
So that makes me think about like regional transit. Is that something that could really draw something through even directly through Hamtramck? I mean, didn't Joe's Campo one time be like the most active shopping district and one of the most active streetcar lines was the Baker that went right through, right? Could there be a way that could kind of help if you could plug into a greater system?
I definitely think that we could benefit from plugging into a greater system. I don't know what that system would be, whether it's like a dedicated rail line or buses. I know there's a lot of questions about the viability of like a rail line and when it's compared to a robust bus system. So I think that those are things that we could look into the future, and that would definitely benefit Hamtramck. As far as plans for something like that right now, I don't believe there's anything in the works, but there might be talks. The Joe Louis Green, right, which is a little bit different. I mean, it's not mass transit. It's like a...
But it's a really interesting project. Why don't we talk about it for just half a second? Like what's...
Right now, they're looking at putting it through our alley system. Right. That is innovative because our roads are not really expandable to put in bike lanes. We don't have those extra lanes that we can break down. So to plug that into the DeQuinder Cut and which is very well used. I mean, it's traveled. People use the DeQuinder Cut in the summertime. They just do in spring, summer, and fall. To be part of that, I think is fantastic. If they can plug that into some suburban trail systems that brings everyone in and out.
So I guess I'll ask you that same question. Biggest challenge and biggest opportunity?
I agree that infrastructure is a big challenge. And to that end, car insurance, the fact that we have numerous residents that live here that probably work here and shop here, but they just don't pay car insurance here and they're not able to vote here. So they're not able to let their civic voice be heard. So that's a challenge. Another challenge in a community like Hamtramck where you've got 23 different languages spoken, it's hard to get everyone on the same page. And I think once we can get everyone on the same page, we're going to be a very thriving community. Not that we aren't thriving right now, but if everybody's working together towards the same goal, you're going to be more successful.
Residents want the same things. They want their garbage picked up. They want their potholes filled. They want, clean water and a walkable community and safety, public safety. They're all on the same page there, but they don't always know it.
And not everybody knows how to express their opinions and make sure that something happens. So sometimes people will feel that something isn't happening or something's not being addressed, but they're just unaware of how it is being addressed or what the actual
process for
for addressing it, or just like some of the details that are like behind the scenes stuff that you don't really consider when you're just thinking like, why isn't this fixed now? Mm-hmm. You don't understand that. Oh, there's a lot of contracts that have to be drawn up. There has to go through approval processes. There's a lot of things that you don't really think about when you're on the other side of the equation, but when you're doing the math, you have to make it all add up.
In a small town like this, when you finally do fix a road and you shut it down for a couple weeks, it wreaks havoc down here. And the same people that say we got to fix the roads lose their stuff when you shut a road down to repave it. Yeah, right. And it's just small town stuff, and it happens all over the place.
So what excites you the most? What are you most looking forward to?
That's a good question. You know what? I know exactly what I'm most excited for. Hamtramck Stadium. Hamtramck Stadium is the former home ball field for the Negro League team, the Detroit Stars. It's one of only 5 home ball fields from that era still standing. It's been in Hamtramck since 1929 after the Stars moved here. I've been working on a project to revitalize that for like the last decade. And we're starting to get some legs. We're starting to get a lot of press. A lot of people and entities are starting to take notice of what we're doing. And we've got to the point where we were forming a plan. We've got a committee with multiple entities, the school district, the city council, the Michigan Municipal League. We're all working together to make this project happen. And I think that it is going to happen, and hopefully in the next couple of years.
Well, Ian, August, thank you so much for joining me on Daily Detroit.
Well, thanks for coming down. We look forward to seeing you in Hamtramck more often.
Here's something else to know today. Ex-NFL wide receiver and Michigan State football standout Charles Rogers has died. He was just 38 years old. Although as of this recording, it's not 100% clear what Rogers died of, a report in MLive says that a high school coach said that Rogers had 30 days to live if he did not get a liver transplant. Rogers was also, reportedly, battling some form of cancer. Rogers had a story with many difficult breaks, especially after being drafted second overall by the Detroit Lions in 2003. His rookie year began on fire, but 6 games in he broke his clavicle, ending his season. And the next year he did it again, and was cut in 2006, ending his pro football career for good. After so much promise, Rogers played just 15 games in 3 NFL seasons. He had also dealt with substance abuse issues, failing drug tests when with the Lions, and been arrested multiple times for alcohol-related incidents. Rogers is survived by 8 children. And that's all for your Daily Detroit today. I hope you're digging out of the snow. It was quite a doozy over here by John R. Don't forget to tell a friend about the Daily Detroit podcast. We do this every weekday, available on your favorite podcast apps. Want to say a big thank you to all of our new listeners on Stitcher. We really appreciate you. And with that, I'm Jer Stays. Take care of each other, and we'll see you around Detroit. Well, after I finish shoveling the steps.